how do you come about it? Like, why is it intellectually, philosophically, technologically important to have these open weights? And did I is it apples to apples? Have I even started in the
No,
the right place?
I think it's definitely in the right place. I think the observation that in the build out of software, that there were these effectively closed proprietary software build outs, and a lot of developers pushed back because they believe that a lot of the code that powers core infrastructure should be in the public domain, and it should be accessible, and any developer should jump in and contribute into it. I think mimics the ideas of how science evolves. The reason we are here, where we are today with AI, is because of science that was done openly. When we think about the fundamental breakthroughs that power the models that are being trained today, it's self-attention, well, it's deep neural networks, self-attention, next token prediction, and reinforcement learning. And obviously there are a lot of papers within each. But if those ideas were not in the public domain, then we probably would not be experiencing the boom that we are in today. So the fundamental progress in science and technology happens because things are done openly. And when we think about, from an open source perspective, what operating system do most computers run on in the world? And it's Linux. I mean, yes, our consumer devices maybe run on iOS or Microsoft, but when you look, if you just look at all the computers in the world, all the servers, and what are they running? They're mostly running Linux.
Yeah, the infrastructure, not even just the servers, but like all your consumer electronics devices, your cars, all, most things that make the world function are probably running on some version of Linux.
Right. And for mobile devices, it's Android. There are more Android devices in the world than iOS devices. Openness spreads and is accessible because everyone can build on top of it. The internet was an open protocol that spread around the world. And there is obviously a desire from a company that's commercial to build things out in a way that's incentivized with them kind of effectively winning commercially. And the current commercial rollouts have basically incentivized closed model development. So it's not irrational that AI development in the West specifically, or especially, has been done in a closed way, but it is not the fundamentally best way to build out what is the most impactful technology of our time. So openness is, I think, fundamental to this technology being both built out in a way where everyone can contribute to ideas of how you get new capabilities into it, but also from a safety perspective, I think it's you don't want safety research to just be concentrated among a few closed labs and 30 people within each that really think about safety. You want everyone to participate in that discourse. Now the question is, how do you set up an entity that enables you to do that at scale, at frontier scale? So you're not kind of looking at small open models, you're looking at open models that are just as good as the best closed ones, and sustain itself so that it can keep doing this. I think that's the big question.
Which was, it was always a big question in Linux land, open source software land. It was like, who's funding I mean, it's a little bit different, but much of that software was these supposed, it always got pitched as kind of like volunteers who are working on Linux, and some of that was true, but it really turned out companies like Google and IBM and you name it, Sun Microsystems, whoever, were paying decent salaries to people to work on this software and contribute it back, and so they had good jobs, and this was important to a lot of companies. And then it was always harder for some giants. I mean, Red Hat managed to create this model where they made money off supporting their software and services around it, but they were really like the biggest, flagship example of somebody who succeeded off this model. So what's the equivalent in open source land? Because you've got what? I mean, you're up against 5 or 6 American foundational model companies that are selling all kinds of their software on these subscription services. I mean, do you do the same thing, or is there sort of like there was with open source software, a slightly different play?
It's a really good question, and this is where the analogy to previous waves of open source software breaks. because previously open source was cheap to develop. I mean, it just required developers, really. And for that reason, you didn't necessarily need very large commercial entities around a lot of these projects. It's not that expensive for Google and some other companies to front the bill for some headcount that that builds out Linux or some other piece of open source software. While of course there's a long tail of contributors who are independently contributing to this stuff as well. The difference now is that models, open or closed, take a lot of money to train. And so you can't you can't do this in a way that is not commercial. But the important thing is to ensure your commercial interests are aligned with the mission of the company. So I think the big challenge is that if you don't think about those things in tandem, then it's a tail wagging the dog sort of situation where you'll start open, but then your product or your commercial business will take you in whatever direction you need to go. And so far, each time that's happened, it's been closed. Like OpenAI started with open artificial intelligence.
Like we were kind of here not too long ago. I mean, at the beginning, OpenAI was meant to be this open counter to Google and DeepMind, and then whoever else was coming, and then, but also to your earlier point, even every company that was working on AI in a meaningful way were publishing tons of papers. It was a lot of academics that had joined the labs, and it's just in the last like 4 years where this started to close up a lot.
Yeah. And I think it's because the commercial interest pulled the companies where they needed to go. And I can understand, where they're coming from. When OpenAI was founded, it took however long, half a decade to get to any point where the commercial structure was clear, probably 7 years from its founding to ChatGPT. And of course, you can't predict what's going to happen 7 years from now. So you can start off with a certain intention, but then you strike gold and your product takes you, right, where your company follows the product. And I think that that's every single large attempt at open intelligence in the field of AI, or I guess, in the field of AI, has either not made it in the sense that it was just not resourced well enough to really punch at the frontier, or the commercial interests of the company took it down a closed path because there has to be a reason why open intelligence matters for you commercially or for your product. And that's why it's really important to kind of set up both. So the way I kind of think of evolution of commercialization of artificial intelligence is almost like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs that need to be met, starting with consumer. That's with ChatGPT and the initial kind of set of consumer products. Actually, before ChatGPT, there was Character AI, which was probably the first viral product built on top of a large language model. And that category has clearly been defined by a set of companies and prominently OpenAI. And so the consumer need has been met. I think moving further upmarket, we have cloud APIs. So where Anthropic, Gemini, and the GPT APIs compete, these are closed model APIs that developers build products on top of. And I would say the primary consumer of that market is the startup. And the startups have now grown to be very big. So now these startups some of them are large enterprises. But I kind of think about that being like the Stripe for intelligence, in the same way that Stripe grew with Lyft and Uber. These APIs are growing with the startups that are building on top of them. And that brings us to the last category in Maslow's hierarchy of artificial intelligence, commercial needs. And that is large enterprise. So once you move up market, and there's basically nothing else beyond there, because large enterprise, what's bigger? Very large enterprise. So you have large enterprise, and at that point, that's when there's a transition point where open models start to become important from a commercial perspective. Because once artificial intelligence becomes a very large line item for you and is a core part of your IP, you start thinking about how do you optimize it, How do you bring it in-house? How do you run it on your infrastructure? How do you keep your data from going to the closed model providers? How do you customize the model, right? You want to be able to predict your costs, and you want to be able to have ownership and customize the model. And so I think in part what's happened is that it took a while for the arc of commercialization of artificial intelligence to hit the point where large enterprises were ready for its adoption, because they're in a sense the slowest to move, right? Consumer happens first, then startups, and then large enterprises. And so I think now is the moment in time when there is a commercial structure where open intelligence is fully aligned with it.
And you guys would help those companies set this up and manage it and tweak it and sort of like in that Red Hat model, or
I think that's roughly right, but much bigger, because what you're providing is effectively the intelligence core that's going to power the company. And so if you are embedded as the intelligence core and the key provider that in the same way that right, there's like the sort of infrastructure AI core, like GPUs and the infrastructure around them, you're now part of that as the intelligence core. There are a lot more things you need to do to make an open model useful to an end customer. And the very basic of it is that you serve an open model on their infrastructure via an API, but there are so many more things that you need to do to make it more universally useful. You need to help customize it. They want to probably build some internal agents around it, so you need to provide software for that. And there's this surface area of value that you can then capture and go monetize with the open model at its core.
Okay. So you're the open AIs, the Anthropics, the Googles, they're kind of keeping all this stuff within their walls and just renting it out as people want. And you guys would be helping companies actually build on top of AI themselves. And your technology would be at the heart of that.
That's right. Okay. So it's not everyone needs to themselves have access to the models and build the intelligence itself, or own it or customize it. And so I think the closed model strategy is great for startups when you're just kind of getting started and you don't want to deal with all the infrastructure complexity. But once you're a very big consumer of artificial intelligence, then you actually want to own it.